This is Lewis Hine, and the impact he had on children in the U.S. was one of such importance that it cannot be overstated. In 1908, he was hired by the National Child Labor Committee to document the exploitive working conditions of child laborers in dozens of occupations. He traveled more than 50,000 miles through the eastern half of the country. His photographs, investigations, and reporting helped bring attention to this issue, which led to federal regulations on workplace conditions, age requirements, and other regulations. On his journey, he used large format cameras, most often a graphics press, for taking photos. He traveled to places that employed children, such as mills, mines, meatpacking houses, canneries, farms, and street-level jobs. He risked his own safety to expose conditions that affected child workers. He put on many personas to gain entry and oftentimes waited to speak with children before or after their shifts. He would be harassed, manhandled, and threatened with harm for taking photos in factories and job sites. Despite this, he was on a mission that turned into a great service for children all over. In the early 1900s, there were no minimum age requirements for child labor in the U.S. Children worked long shifts up to 12 hours with few breaks. They were exposed to poor conditions such as fumes, poisonous gases, chemicals, and heavy machinery. Children as young as 4 were called helpers. Children as young as 5 would work hands-on with machinery. Between 1890 and 1910, 18% of children aged 10 to 15 were employed full-time. Children worked in mills, glass and cotton factories, and often in proximity with open machinery. In 1900, over 25,000 child laborers working in mills were under 16 years old. Many children were too young to perform tasks alone, so they worked as unpaid helpers to older children or adults. Mill owners preyed on poor families that did not have skilled workers in the household. They saw these children as an investment for their factories as future employees. The boy on the top was named Giles and was 11 years old when he got into an accident as a mill worker. A piece of machine fell on his foot, mashing his toe. He then fell into a spinning machine and his hand went into unprotected gearing. This crushed his little hand and tore out 2 of his fingers. The company he worked for refused to pay restitution to his parents. It would only give a small amount of money to Giles directly. Children as young as 4 years old worked on farms and on the coasts in the seafood industry. They worked outdoors as cotton, fruit, and shrimp pickers for long hours and little pay. The boy on the right is 5-year-old Manuel, a shrimp picker. The pile behind him are oyster shells that were gathered by child laborers. The little girl on the left is 5-year-old Vera Hill. She would work the entire day picking and adding cotton to the bag, which would weigh roughly 25 pounds when full. These children often worked in the dark and were required to perform hard physical tasks beyond their capacity. Their positions included trappers, breaker boys, and helpers. They were exposed to cave-ins, explosions, fires, gas poisoning, and even floods. The dust-filled air could also cause lifelong health problems and other diseases. They worked up to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week for little pay. They were usually 8 to 12 years old, but companies brought in boys as young as 5. Children were made to crawl through tight spaces and faced with possible cave-ins while moving through tunnels. The boy on the left worked as a driver for a coal mine. He is wearing an oil wick cap lamp, which would be lit while he was working in the mine tunnels to detect gases. Examples of street-level work for children included newsies, shoe shiners, and hawkers selling items to passersby. The boys on the top left were Western Union messengers who worked the night shift in 1909. Hine's interview notes stated that he was very concerned for their safety as they took on assignments that took them through the red light districts, riddled with drug dealers and sex workers. Newsy boys sold newspapers and many walked the streets barefoot. They often had to lie about their ages to keep their jobs. The little boy on the top right is an example of this. He told Lewis Hine that he was 7 years old, but did not even have the skills to count change to customers. To me, he looks to be about 5 years old. These are tenement buildings that child laborers and their families were provided by the government. They were poorly built, overcrowded, and lacked proper ventilation and indoor plumbing. They were often subject to fires and the spread of disease. Lewis Hine's photography helped change the nation's child labor laws, which led to the passage of the Keating-Owens Act of 1916. This act set strict age minimums and shift durations. It also created safety regulations. By 1914, 35 states had previously prohibited employment of children under 14 years old, and those under 16 years old could work an 8-hour maximum shift. Lewis Hine's images represent one of the first examples of photography helping enact social change. Lewis Hine's use of social documentary changed the course of the child labor reform in the early 20th century. His images showed the public what was taking place behind closed doors and swayed the public opinion in favor of labor reform, which led to laws restricting labor and improving working conditions. Without his dedication, social change would not have happened the way it did and was vital for children everywhere. Thank you for watching my presentation today.